Hey guys, welcome to another episode. What's going on?
Hey, got my caffeine.
Yeah.
My coffee this morning. I feel good.
Good. Ken?
We're sitting in a different part of the room and it's messing me up.
We still have our silver table.
Yeah,
though.
we're about maybe 8 feet over.
Yeah.
Ken can handle it.
If you're watching this on video.
The studio's been rearranged for
Slightly.
some production. It looks like. I don't know. Looks cool.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, we do this podcast from a studio in Franklin, which is a podcast studio, but it's also a videography studio. So there's some work being done on the other side of the room here. So we'll move down a little bit. Thank you to Glenn Schweitzer for the use of the studio.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right, guys. So today we've been talking a little bit about at the coffee shop prior to this, one of our favorite subjects, which is between the three of us, I think over the years, we have done, I know in my practice and I know Brad for you and Ken probably have bought and placed multiple millions of dollars of media on behalf of our clients. And so I thought that that's a subject that so many agencies handle, whether it be Facebook ads or Google or any type of programmatic advertising on any type of social or just general display.
And there's this old media that's called television.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, Ken and I aren't that old, so we don't.
Oh, sorry.
We've never dealt with
radio.
That. Yeah.
Local radio.
Yeah, so a little bit of history. Prior to the late 1990s, media buying was generally carried out by the advertising agency. They had a department within the ad agency / marketing agency.
Yeah.
And then in the late 90s, they kind of unbundled those, and all of a sudden you had splits and departments. So the old agencies, whether it be like an Ogilvy and Mather, they had their media buying department internally split off, became, I think, Mindshare, things like that in the late 90s. And then you had just companies that just did media buying, and you had companies that just did creative and marketing. And so that kind of opened up a whole new world. And I know, Brad, you can talk about this a little bit in your experience, because you did work in a traditional advertising / marketing agency back in the day, but it goes back to the 20s or 30s, right? The way that they bought and sold and made money on it.
I'm old school, and sometimes that's not good. Sometimes it is, but I started my career in really more traditional advertising, and really it was just really television, radio, print, outdoor, direct mail and other things. And so this is before the internet. And, there's a model that was created back probably in the 30s. I have to do a little more research to see which agency actually really founded this. I think it was a collaboration of agencies, big agencies, of how they deal with media and the commissions and what the commissions actually are used for. And so there's this kind of 15% benchmark of commissions. No agency really gets that because most of their clients are savvy enough to know they can negotiate that 15%. But it also went towards other things. It was much different than the way we purchase media now. You had trafficking, which is basically when you produce a television spot, you had no way to digitally submit that to the stations to where it was going to be played. So you had to make sure tapes were sent. They had to be sent to certain departments. You had to make sure that the material was received and it was queued up if there was a problem. They would, you need some time. And so all of that took manual resources and time to do that. So that 15% wasn't just for creative, or it wasn't another cost. There's a lot of cost to buying and purchasing that media. But but I think that now, I think this discussion we're going to have is, does the old way need to change, and has it already changed? And should you even live in the past at all? Is there any benefits of media buying models where there is an actual commission anymore? And is there a better model for a business, especially maybe a smaller or mid-sized agency or startup agency? What is the best approach to that so that the agency takes less risk?
Yeah, and I think the holdover from those days is still around. If you've ever purchased media for a client on a digital platform, or agencies who do, many of them, the model
Yeah.
is still a percentage, 15%. Sometimes I've seen it as high as 20% in digital, but
Yeah. Well, digital can be actually more time consuming because if you're including your reporting, especially that with digital, and this is the beauty of it, right? We had ways to measure television in the past, but not a strong direct sale that we could say that ad actually directed into a sale, unless the television commercial had some type of incentive code or something that when you call up, you give them a code and you get a discount, and they put that into their little database and say, okay, we have a buyer with that code. It was really hard to attribute your television to an actual sale. In fact, most of the television that is run is not all direct sales. Most of it's branding commercials, right? You're watching a new, Cadillac commercial, and it's all branded. There's no direct response unless it's a dealer ad with some type of incentive in it. So it was really hard to measure. But today's world, our media, we actually can see the real-time conversion, especially in the e-com space. Like we know we get a purchase, and we know what that purchase is going to bring in. And so we can actually attribute not just ROAS, but we can actually attribute true ROI. And that becomes a whole different space now, but it takes time to measure that, report, talk with your clients, and all the other things you're doing, you're bringing in your media buy as well. So there's still a lot of maintenance to it, but it's different maintenance. It's really more reporting and tweaking and refining maintenance versus just trying to get the materials to the stations or something. Coming from an old school, the commission base always frustrated me because savvy clients who used to work with agencies know that they can use that and they can get a lot out of you. So what they'll do is say, well, if we're going to give you $3 million or $5 million of media dollars, and you're going to do 15%, we want all the creative in there too, not just the media. The work it takes to do the media, but we want the creative in there too. So, and then they don't want it for 15%, they want it for 6%. And so it's a negotiating tool because they know they kind of feel like they're getting kind of an opportunity to lower that, as well as it sometimes could always feel like it's kind of like a nickel and dime. So it's always been something where like, well, you're charging us for creative and you're charging us $300,000 to do a television commercial and ads and other things along with that campaign. Plus you're charging us a 15% commission. Like, where does that go to? Because they don't understand all the work on the back end it took to actually get these ads in place and get them on the TV. But, so it's one of those things that's it's always fighting. I think people today, from what I've seen, if you try to charge commission for digital, they feel like you're nickel and diming them, but they're okay if you just charge them a fee to manage the ads and say, this is what it costs to develop the campaigns. This is what it's cost to manage. We're going to be managing these ads for 6 months. And here's what the cost is. They seem okay with that because they can actually put their head around what that includes. But the 15% is this kind of nebulous. They don't really understand where it goes. They think it's just additional scraping the top.
It's interesting to hear all that background because, like I've said before, I don't have that background. And I think it's I guess you told me it could be a disadvantage, but I think it's an advantage because you kind of know where things are coming from. So just to clarify, when you say the commission, you are also charging, or they were charging a fee on top of that, a commission plus a fee.
Well, you're talking about in the digital space?
No, it was just the
commission fee, right?
Well, it really depends. I mean, a lot of agencies, if they're buying $50 million of 15% there's a lot of money there. It's enough to do creative.
Yeah.
If you're spending $200,000 an ad to produce a television ad at that time, there was enough to actually do the creative and the production out of that.
And make a profit.
Yeah. But if you're only doing $50,000 at 15%, there's not enough. There was never enough. You have to develop another budget for a creative because there's not enough in there. So it really depended on the client and how much they were spending. And if you're spending $50 million in media, you're a big brand. I mean, used to be working with agencies. You're going to be negotiating.
Yeah. So we've been breaking down in the last few episodes pricing and trying to just have discussions that people don't have around pricing. We talked about contracts. Now, in the media space, in the buying space, and especially, I would say, I mean, most media buying is, well, I would think it's digital, right?
There's still television.
No,
Yeah,
there's
but
still
even that's-
I'm saying,
even
like,
that's
you know,
different,
I
yeah.
don't even know. I don't know what those percentages are. Maybe you do.
Yeah.
But let's kind of dig into the model, because I do think it's broken. We've been kind of chewing on how we change that, and then what fees look like, you know, because I'd like to talk about that, because I think that here's the challenge that I see with buying ads and that being your service offering. And I would say, again, you might be buying Facebook ads, you might be buying television ads, doesn't really matter. I think from the outside, that is seen as a commodity. What do you think about that? Because from the outside, I think potential clients see all that media buying as a commodity, which is a big challenge if your agency is built around that service.
You know, it's interesting because we're a small agency. So a lot of agencies, the larger agencies, they actually work with media buying companies. And so media buying companies buy in scale, and they're able to get reduced fees and costs. Now, they may not be able to get reduced fees on platforms like Facebook, but certainly on television they can. When it comes to television, traditional inventory, that's still digital though. All the assets are delivered digitally. It's a lot easier to do that work.
You don't have that trafficking issue.
A trafficking issue or sending things in the mail, or FedExing stuff. That's where it got really crazy. It was a crazy time. But but you're right. I think that media buying for most clients see that as just a commodity task that isn't. It's not like creative, right? Or it's just everybody's going to do the same level quality of work for that.
The challenge is it's not a commodity.
It's just cost.
It isn't actually a commodity, but I believe it's seen as that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
It's not a commodity, but it could be seen as a commodity.
I think that presents a real challenge, because the question is, okay, then how do you compete? In a true commodity market, you compete on price. And
well, things become a commodity, I'm convinced, when things become common and accessible.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about media buying back in the day, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, during that whole period, if you wanted to place a television commercial, an ad, you couldn't just go do it yourself or hire some guy down the street who had a little agency. You had to go with the major agencies who had contracts with major networks, and major networks say, we only work with these few agencies.
And a lot of media companies, they pre-purchased media, and they may still do that, where they literally will purchase blocks of content and resell it. So they buy it at a less cost, mark it up a bit, and resell it to brands. So there'd be pre-buying space already and inventory and programming.
Versus today, anyone in the world can log on. Literally anyone in the world, if you live in Timbuktu and have an internet connection, you can create and place a Facebook ad, right? Yeah. So, yes, it's a commodity.
So one of the things I really think is interesting to debate here, and if nothing else, because it's something that's rattling around in my head, if nothing else makes anyone who's listening to this just think about it, is Facebook and all the digital channels. Certainly not the traditional ones, but it's certainly easier. They're all making it easier by the day for anyone to launch ads, do those kind of things. And so how do you live on that type of service offering, if that's your thing? How do you actually make it not a commodity? And where does that go? Because I actually think that it's a dying model to base your business on the media itself, because that portion of it's commoditized. Now, there are things that aren't, like the creative isn't, like some of the strategy isn't, all the things that go around that. And so, a portion of our business is based on that. I've been intentional about trying to our business isn't based on that from a whole, but there's a portion of a business based on that. And I think that one of the things that we're going through and I'm thinking about is how do we position, if we're going to sell some commodity or some things that people see as commodities, like buying ads and those kind of things, how do we position it where we're different? And if you want to just run ads yourself, then you probably should just do that yourself. But if you want someone who has experience in X, Y, and Z with this type of filter and who can execute this kind of thing, that's why
it's really we're wrestling with this idea in our agency is, what does our future look like when it comes to media buying, and how should we charge the client for our time and energies for that? And we've done all types of models for our agency, and some work for certain clients, some don't work for certain clients. So it's we've even used to we buy the media and rebill them with a commission, but you take on a lot of risk when you do that. So if you do that, you should only do it with really trusted clients, because you could be held with a bill that your client may never pay. It could be a lot, right? So
this is a big topic, and I think we should break this up into 2 episodes. So should we all just agree right now? We're gonna next episode we'll continue this, but
I think
we still got a lot.
Topic,
we got a lot more on this episode. So that's a good point, and it opens up a whole can of worms of this commodity idea, the way that obviously the amount of spend. But also the purpose has changed, because prior, when you had a television ad or a print ad or even a radio ad, everybody was pretty much on the same page. You said, okay, why are you doing this? Well, we've got a product launch, create awareness, we want people to buy the product, right? But it was all one thing. Now with digital and the commoditization or more prevalence of it, you've got the ability to say, is this ad going to be an awareness branding campaign? Is this solely, based on per sales? Is this just a lead, or is this a lead cost per lead type thing you're doing? You're all over the place when it comes to the reasons behind them.
Another thing that's really changed a lot in this space is that running ads like, let's say, on Facebook, you have way more opportunity to hyper focus and target your audience than you ever had in our history. Before, when you did a strategy, it was like, we're going to be on this television show because it skews 50 plus. It skews 50 plus in this kind of thing. I mean, it's very wide audience. So you're spending a lot of money on people that you may not buy your product. Where with Facebook and Instagram now, the strategy is even the audiences are so much more hyper focused that there is a true strategy. And not only strategy, there's a testing that goes on, because you can see real-time results of response. So you're testing your audiences a lot more. You're spending time doing that. That's where the real strategy happens. To me, I always feel like, and I try to tell clients this, is that the initial strategy of a campaign isn't the heart and soul of your campaign. The heart and soul is tweaking that campaign and measuring the results and continuing to refine that campaign over time to get the best results. It's the refining that takes the time. It's the measuring and pitting campaigns against each other, A/B testing, and looking at different language and looking at different audiences that are responding better. That's really the heart and soul. So I almost think of like Facebook advertising is no longer marketing advertising. It's almost like you're doing focus groups at the same time, right? Like you're learning about your customer and who's your ideal customer at times, because you're going further and further and deeper in that audience to understand nuances about that audience and attributions about that audience. So it's a much different way that you think about media. And to me, that's not a commodity. That's the value. That's the value. But that's part of the process now. Even with like we talk a lot about Facebook and Instagram, but we know that when you run ads on Facebook and Instagram needs time to learn as well, right? You can't just run something on there and day one think that's the cost of acquisition you're going to get. Facebook is learning, and they want you to have the best success too. Because if you can have success as an advertiser on Facebook, you're going to spend more money,
right?
And that's what they want. So it's just a different picture, and it's.
So how do you? I totally agree. The question is, how do you? If because I would guess that most agencies, a big portion of what they do is marketing, and maybe the majority of that is on the digital side. So how do you, as an agency, position and create a strategy that does not rely on the nuts and bolts and decommoditizes that? as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I think it's things like what you just said, like there are processes, there are maybe experiences that you have, there are kind of secret sauces or how you think about things, which would make someone that's that aligns with that want to hire you more than someone else.
Yeah, and what I try to do is educate the customer is that you can find a lot of companies that will run Facebook ads, and they'll probably set up your ads and let them run and just let them drip all day long and never look back at them. And just they don't even really care about the true return on investment. They just let them run. Maybe they're just not savvy enough to really understand how to refine. With our agency, everything's about return on investment. Everything. If they're not getting a return on investment financially, we're not doing our job, or we're not able to do our job. Not that we,
I would say able to do your job.
Able to do our job. Not that we're doing our job. We'll do our best, though, to make sure that we're not impeding on that process. It could be that the product fit is not great in the market. We've had that before, and it's tough to tell your clients that really nobody wants your product. We're we're driving tons of people to it that they're just not buying because of cost or something, right? But so we try to educate our clients that there's a fee that is going to be an ongoing fee that you're going to need, because it's not just start it and run and let it run by itself. There's actually a lot of work that goes into it. And we also want to make sure that we don't do something for a client that doesn't allow us the money or the resources to be able to do that, because we know that's what's going to get the end result, that the client's going to hire, it's going to continue our relationship or not. So if we hire you as a customer, we say, well, here's what it's going to cost. They go, oh man, that's expensive. We don't want to pay $5,000 a month for maintenance, and that seems weird. What do I get out of that? When you try to express what you get out of that, try to educate them. But let's just say they come back and say, well, we got $1,000 a month, and you're like, well, but that's not going to produce the return on investment that you're looking for. You educate them, but we also want to make sure that we don't set ourselves up for failure, that we don't have enough resources to actually now take that campaign and tweak it and get it to the point where it's humming. So,
yeah, we talked about that last episode, like the idea of having not enough to create success is really important. And you need to be aware of like what it takes to actually create that success and be honest with yourself.
And so I think that's where customers have a hard time, because if agency A says, yeah, we'll do ads for you and we'll set them up and we'll just let them run, it might not be the same as our approach to it, but a customer may not see that, because all they see is how much they're going to spend in media. And then they look, well, your fees are 3 times as high outside of the media costs. Yeah, but we're adding new creative every 2 weeks, and we're testing them, and we're refining them, and we're analyzing your website, and we're looking at real-time data on your website to see what people are doing there and what questions, and we're retweaking creative to see some of the issues that we might be having where customers are not getting over hurdles, or they have questions, or whatever the case may be. So if you can express that relationship, and I think digital campaigns, they're best when that's actually done. Because if I can tweak out 1 or 2% better conversion rates, that can be a lot of money for our customers.
So I think what I'm hearing you guys say, and I think the advice to those listening, is that if you still want to do ad buying, and that may be a big portion of what you're doing, and if you're struggling with what to do, I think what I'm hearing, and I agree, and I want to speak into this, is position yourself either in a niche that you know really, really well, or become an expert in testing and deciphering and connecting the dots for the client. I think that's the real value where people are willing to pay. And I think we've talked about this on past episodes based on what's happened the past few months from the pandemic side, is people are really, really looking for experts. They want professionalism. They want experience, because they realize that this thing called digital is not going to go away. And I think the last holdovers from the old age of, we don't play in digital, we just place TV ads and print ads, I think it's pushed them over the line. And so, yes, while it is a commodity, I think people are willing to pay for expertise,
right?
Testing,
it comes back to that
ROI, et cetera.
And we talk a lot about Facebook and Instagram, but I'm telling you, the future of other platforms are going to be very similar. And you may be uploading a 30-second commercial that's going to run on demand. It's going to be run on Netflix. It's going to be running on, and Netflix is not the right platform, but like it might be running on Amazon, right? With where you watch commercials.
Yeah.
Any place that you would watch commercials on any platform will have a very similar type of user interface as Facebook has, where you dial in
and I think
audiences.
To that point, right? I think we've discussed this before, and I just want to make sure, like, I believe that the right strategy is to not fight against the platforms, you know? And so look at where the platforms are going. All of them are becoming easier and easier to use. They're trying to make it easier for just anyone to run ads. They're trying to make it easier for anyone to just run ads and step away, and for the platform to figure out how to make it successful, right? And so with that being the case, position your company appropriately. If you're competing just as a Facebook marketer, you have to, it's a challenge because there are a lot of those, but also Facebook is making it easier and easier for people to do it themselves. And you may argue that, but you see it happening. And so whether or not that will ultimately just be the way it goes, what I believe is the smart thing is to think about, okay, well, what is really the value beyond pushing the buttons and that kind of stuff? And that's where the emphasis has to be, because that actually is where the real value is. Even if these platforms become completely self-serving, like to where anyone could do it, there's still a value in experience and expertise, especially in that marketing arena. And so the sort of process that we go through is, I tell people all the time, like, we run a lot of digital ads, several $1 million a month, and we do it on Facebook and that kind of stuff. We're really, really good at it. We spend actually a lot of money staying at the edge of it, which is really a challenge. It's actually not fun to do. Like, if you don't have to do that, I would actually say don't do that, because it's really hard to stay in the know, just with how fast they move. And so, but that's not why you would hire us to do that. There's a million people that are really good at that kind of thing. If you just need someone to manage your Facebook budget, like, you wouldn't hire us just for that. You'd hire us because we do that through the lens of 20 years of e-commerce experience. And when we're running those things, we're thinking about, how does it affect this channel? How does it affect wholesale? Is it going towards our goal? Is there another issue with something happening on the conversion path? Those are some of the kind of filters that we put it through. And that's why you would hire us to run your campaigns. But you wouldn't just, we don't compete on as digital ad marketers. And I would say that if you do, that's no problem. Figure out what it is that you're competing on and do that the best. But I think for the majority of companies, a lot of times they fall into being a Facebook marketer or an advertising agency that buys ads wherever they buy it. And they don't realize that they're actually competing in a commodity, and that actually it's going in a bad direction.
I mean, from an agency's perspective, let's say that you're a larger agencies and you're working with larger brands. Facebook is just one of many channels, right? And so the benefits of hiring an agency is continuity of messaging, campaign messaging. So they're producing content that is going to be part of a larger scope campaign that would include television. It would include Facebook. Most brands will be everywhere. Right. And so that's the benefit. And again, as a larger agency, when you're running that much media, you might have a separate division or a separate company that you actually do a lot of that with. But an agency would be defining probably the audience, defining this audience strategy, and it's just getting companies to launch everything and launch it on time and shut it down on time and all this stuff that you do for different campaigns. I'd like to talk a little bit about what are the risks of buying media for an agency and where you could eliminate the risks. So for us, we've we have all different models we've played in. We played in the model that we buy the media for you, and we charge you a percentage on that, and we rebill you in 30 days, and you have to pay, right? And that works for some of our clients that are not billing a ton, so that we're making 15% commission within 30 days on it, and it's all being charged on a credit card. So it's valuable for us, but at the same time, it's a risk because we're taking on that debt. And if you have a client that decides not to pay the bills, and let's just say you're spending $100,000 a month in media, you're stuck with $100K bill that you may fight to have to get paid back. So you're held with the bag. That's one model. We are moving completely away from that model. Only there is financial benefits, but the risk outweighs that benefit. I think we're actually moving to a model that would eliminate the commission altogether, because I think that it's always, in this world, to me, it always feels like an added cost, a nickel and diming cost. And I think that we actually have the ability to charge more for our fees of actually and outlining what those fees do, the management fees. And a lot of that is understanding, like, with a customer, when we deal with a customer, we develop our key performance indicators of what is really going to be, what do we need to show that we're showing a success. Well, a lot of that's reporting, and a lot of that is deep numbers. And the client knows that. The client wants that. They help define the KPIs along with us. So they know it takes work to get that data, to read through that data, to simplify that data so that it's really clear, and then present that data. So they know there's work involved in that. So they're willing to pay for that because they know they can actually attribute it to real hours. That 15%, sometimes they can't contribute. They don't really know what that gets them. And again, that goes up and down depending on their media spend. So if 1 month they're spending $100,000, that 15%'s a little bit of chunk and change. If they're spending the next month $10,000 because they reduced their spend for a couple months because they're taking a break or doing something different with their campaigns, and all of a sudden that goes down to almost zero. And so it fluctuates, but your time doesn't fluctuate. You're still going to spend as much time on a campaign reporting if you're spending $10,000 in media, and all of a sudden you just now add a couple of zeros on it, and you're spending, what is that? $1 million?
Yeah, I think the model's broken, and and we say it came from. I mean, I don't know if this is fact check, but somewhere in the 30s, right?
Old school.
So we still use that today. I understand the reason it's still relevant. It's kind of easy to slip into. It's something that's kind of a standard. Everyone does it.
It's simple. You just charge a 15%.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's simple, and a lot of times it's probably not enough. It may not even cover your costs a lot of times too. So I won't even say that it's beneficial on either side, but it is broken in that I believe it obviously pulls in the wrong direction. And so the more, there's this mindset. I would say that it's rare that it plays out because you got to be pretty unethical and have a little character for it to actually play out. But there's this potential for, you're not aligned with the goals, right? You're aligned to spend more. And so I think that is a potential something in the client's mind that could be a tripping something to stumble them, but it's broken. So the question is how do you create a new version of that? So we're sort of like actively messing with this too. We're trying to figure out how do we go away from any sort of percentage on that kind of stuff, because really the cost drivers have in a lot of ways nothing to do with the budget, right? The budget does influence it a bit because, right, you're spending more, you need more attention and that kind of thing. So I get that there is a cost driver on the budget side, but for the most part, it's how much, are you creating, how many times are you refreshing ads, how many platforms are you managing, a lot on the creative side, like is there a strategy involved in it, which there should be. That's where the cost drivers are.
Yeah. I think philosophically, clients understand that this is not something that they're experts in. They can do it, right? They can do it internally. They can do it. But at the end of the day, they're looking for that extra 5%, conversion, 2% conversion, 10% conversion that we as agencies can provide. And so that's what we have, that's what we put forward as our expertise is we're going to get you better conversion rates. And I think what I'm hearing around the table, and I think I hear echoed in the agency world is, while that's great, and that should be, as you said, Brad, the number one thing you focus on is ROI. There's just so much else around this whole idea of, and maybe we should stop calling it media buying, because you're not just buying media. You're not just putting money in a machine and getting something out and just handing it back to the client. You're literally providing a whole system architecture of how do you take their product from point A to point B. And for most agencies, they're doing many things along the way. They start with the branding, then they go into creative, messaging, positioning, psychology of talking to, identifying who their customers are, creating those personas before they even get to an ad. And I think maybe we should reverse the whole, like you said, is flip it on its head and just be like, media buying is just one piece of it.
It's marketing,
It's
right?
just marketing. So we've got to build a model that accounts for that and puts media buying in its right place versus just standalone thing that's just like 15%.
Yeah,
We don't do that with anything else.
The naming of itself kind of positions it the wrong way.
Let's come up with a new name.
No, I mean, can you imagine if we said,
I'm on it.
we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this.
Well, not even everyone calls it that, right? Like, I mean, it's buying ads, it's Facebook marketing, it's buying billboards, it's marketing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, imagine if we did that with anything else that we do, i.e., hey, we're gonna design your packaging for your product, and we're gonna charge you 15% of whatever you're spending to like print those things.
Yeah.
It's a silly model, honestly. It worked for a time, but
Yeah.
those times, like you said, we have evolved and changed, and the whole idea. We haven't even brought up the whole point of programmatic advertising.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother beast.
Yeah.
But that's where digital is going.
And I think that's really what we do is programmatic marketing. It just, Facebook is one of the pieces in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, the media buying is one of the pieces in that puzzle. And that's, I think, one thing that we need to do better as an agency is to educate our clients that that's really what we're doing.
Something we started doing that we're playing with, kind of messing with that model or changing it, is, again, we see a lot of people, if you're on the early stage side of the spectrum as a company, and again, we work primarily in the e-commerce space, direct to consumer, work with really big brands. We also work with really small brands that are growing. And those small brands typically are doing a lot themselves already. And those are the type of people that often want help, but don't want to pay for that traditional model. And that's fine, if it's fine. So it certainly requires some education, but something we started doing is like, hey, look, if you have internal resources to execute on these things, like design, we have a lot of clients who have internal designers, video people. Video is a huge part of obviously what we do. Even Facebook ad buyers and not, I would even say not true experienced marketers, but people that know the Facebook platform. Well, how do we actually, where is their value to add? And oftentimes it's just in the simple strategic experience, because you can have all the activities that you want, but if there's no experienced strategy to kind of guide it, it's hard to get to an end result. So what we started doing was we just offer coaching, like ads coaching in the different platforms, and so we don't have to do anything. We'll provide some analysis, and we'll answer questions, and we'll actually give some feedback and insight and oversight. But you may have a team that's doing it internally, but they don't have the experienced person on their team to know, okay, how do we when they hit challenges, or what are other brands doing, and that kind of thing. And so that is one area that we're testing, and it's a lot lower cost. It's not based on a percentage, and it kind of lets them, it equips them the way they want to be equipped for those type of companies versus trying to force them into a model that just doesn't fit.
That's good.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about too is, Ken, you might have some insight on this, is the idea of what,
probably not, but I'll try.
If you're working with a new customer and you're going to do you're doing a campaign, and part of it, let's just say, includes a Facebook campaign, Instagram campaign. what do you charge for initially? Like we know there's a capital expense that has to happen if you get a brand new client, let's say, and they've never done any Facebook, or let's say they're a startup and they have a new product, they've never done any advertising. There's a cost of entry to get them set up, right? You have to set up a platform. You have to make sure that their website is refined. You have to make sure that all of the conversion triggers, pixels are working. There's a cost to that, right? Do you charge them for that, or is that part of like you give that to them just as being a client, knowing that you're going to spend and develop campaigns on the platform?
Okay, so I know one of the things we want to do in the next episode is to dig into the actual pricing around these things. So I won't dig into our pricing just yet, but I will say we hadn't been charging any setup fee. And then we started doing that because we started realizing there is we were sort of charging the same fee as a month that's kind of running. And so it's kind of includes like running campaigns and setting everything up. But started realizing, and again, you need to know where your costs are and be able to analyze this internally as an agency, that, the first month there was, at least double, maybe more time spent in just setting things up. You think about, again, we talk a lot about Facebook, any digital platform, but Google. Each one of them, if there's no account that exists already, that's quite a bit of time. But even if there is one, you want to make sure that everything's tracking correctly. And there's sort of all sorts of other things, like when it comes to just understanding their right. brand and getting approval on general creative and direction and copy and all that kind of stuff. So there's all this stuff that happens at the beginning that doesn't happen ongoing the same way. And so we do now, and it probably honestly doesn't cover truly what that costs, but it's sort of it cushions that a little bit so that we,
one of the things that we find a lot, and again, we do quite a bit of, like, for instance, Facebook advertising, but I always tell the clients, we find out that they're, where we're driving the clients, like typically it's a landing page, or if it isn't a landing page, it's a website, and that is, we always find that if we're driving them to a website or e-com, there's other problems that are having. And so I try to tell customers, like, think of everything we're doing holistically as a whole baseball team. And your pitcher is the Facebook ads. They're just driving leads, boop, boop, pop, pop, right? But if the catcher has a hole in his mitt, it doesn't matter how many leads you drive to them. And so we find a lot of clients have a lot of holes in their catcher mitt.
Right.
And that need to be resolved and fixed. And some of those things are not easy fixes. They're restructuring, redoing the customer journey, refining their e-com platform because it's confusing. And so then we look at other tools to use to say, okay, and once we drive people here, we have some we feel that there's some holes, but we want to clog them up, but we really need to start driving traffic to see what people are really looking for. We look at, models we use like Hotjar. We look at real user videos, understanding where people are getting confused, what kind of information they're looking for, they're not finding, to be able to help convert them into a sale. And so there's a lot more strategy to the Facebook ads than just Facebook ads. Again, the pitcher might be really pitching well, but the catcher has holes in it.
And I think that's a question, and that's a differentiator too. And there's no right or wrong, but as an agency that does one thing, are you just the pitcher? Are you just, and because if so, then you have to communicate that and position that a certain way, or are you more holistic so that you're the pitcher, but you also can understand if there's a hole somewhere else in the funnel?
You're also the shortstop.
Everyone wants to be the shortstop.
That's right.
But yeah, I like that analogy actually. We've had several situations where because oftentimes we're in a space that's constant, that companies are changing fast, especially if they're scaling quickly, and we're usually trying to help them stabilize. And so in the e-commerce space, like, that's happening a lot, and there are people on the client's team as well as our team working on similar things. And recently it's happened a couple times where you start to realize that certain ads are not performing the way they were, and you're digging around, but it actually turns out, and this happened recently, where they were going to these landing pages for products, and the client changed the page and didn't tell anyone, and didn't maybe know enough that you can't just do that. And so it was going to like a 404 page.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff happens all the time. And actually it's literally a needle in a haystack, even with the right kind of analysis when there's a lot going on. And so, yeah, it's not one thing. And that's why I would hope as a community, we can stop telling people it's just one thing, because let's just be honest, like Facebook ads cannot control ROAS. They just can't. Mm-hmm. Right? So you could have the most amazing Facebook person in the world, but if your website's broken, your ROAS is still going to be horrible.
Right. There's so many pieces along the way, and we've just talked.
So we need to educate that way. I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And along the same lines is we've been talking about Facebook ads almost exclusively, but we equally spend as much time on Google ads, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's a whole nother beast. It's a whole nother philosophy.
Well, true there, true in TV too. I mean, I would imagine, right? Like your website's not working or your phone's not on
Sure.
or whatever.
Call center's not answering the phone calls. I don't know.
But each platform carries with it a whole different strategy, philosophy,
Yes.
functionality, reporting system. So it's not just an ad is an ad is an ad is an ad on any platform to the same demographic.
Different skill set.
It's a different
Completely
skill
different
set.
skill set. to operate.
Different skill set. Then you got YouTube, which is a whole different skill
Yes.
set.
And I'm a big believer, and this is just my own philosophy. I never want any customer to buy a product from us that is based on clicks.
Yeah.
I don't care about clicks. Like this is my philosophy, because I know clicks don't equal return on investment. Sometimes they do. We measure clicks. We measure how many people are visiting your site, what they're doing on your site, but we're not just letting it go there. And I think so much of the media buying space, we talk to so many companies that come to us and say, yeah, we tried some Facebook, but it just never did anything. I said, well, what was your cost of true customer acquisition? I don't know. We never measured it. They just gave us a report every month that showed how many people came to our website. I'm like, what? That's like first base.
Yeah.
Like because you weren't even you weren't getting a home run because you weren't trying to hit a home run. Because you weren't measuring and really refining to show true
the only
return
thing
on investment.
Where I would push back on that a little bit, the only thing that I would say is I have had clients, and there are industries where ROAS isn't their main thing.
Correct.
i.e.,
Correct.
entertainment industry. We want to get as many people to hear
awareness.
and know and click on this as we
There
can.
is a difference between an awareness campaign on social and a direct response campaign where you have to tie it to real return on investment.
Right.
I get that. And that's
another,
legit.
That's also another point of education, because you're right. Like not every campaign is meant to sell things.
Correct.
Right? Like, so as a business, on the business side of what that company that you're marketing, there has to be some sort of funnel or, customer journey, or, this thing that takes people from cold to medium to warm to buying.
Yeah.
And the campaigns that you run are in those different categories, right? And that's kind of basic, but you're right. Like a lot of brands don't understand that often. And then often I would find even a lot of marketers don't understand that, because everyone's trying to hit the home run when you can't. If you're swinging for a home run every time, you may not ever get on first base, and you probably won't win the game.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because what we're talking about is to get to the return on ad spend. Sometimes there's a strategy that takes multiple touches and multiple engagements. So it's almost like you have to educate your client that says, we have to run an awareness campaign first before we get to that, especially when it comes to high dollar products, right?
Yeah. And I think that there's a different level of client will expect different things. So a big brand would, let's say you're marketing a movie, they would be all over just awareness. Just bring me we just want awareness, right?
Or trailer views.
Or trailer views, or whatever that is, right? Now that's their KPI. That's the performance indicator that says that's a success. I've never seen it any other way. I could be wrong, but most small businesses that you might have as a client will always care about making money and what the initial response is. I've never had many clients that after a few months of just getting clicks to their website, but not being able to identify a sale to that website, they get antsy. They're like, I don't know that this is working for me. Again, it's that
Right.
return on investment mentality.
Sure.
Well, at some point you have to make money. It's just
sometimes
a
you gotta
question
make
of
money.
what the path to that
Yes,
is,
but
and that has to be lined out.
big brands understand that they do need to do awareness. I used to work for Campbell Walden. One of the clients I worked on was Chevrolet. And so we would do brand ads, and then we would do dealer ads, which are direct response. And we knew we had to do brand ads.
Right.
We need to make that car look really sexy with a new feature. And we never asked anything in the commercial. We never said buy it or do it. We just wanted to make it look great, cool. But then we run ads with the dealers that we do dealer promotions because we know that people will take advantage of incentives. So,
And by the way, whether you like it or not, that's still the case today.
That is the
because
case.
if no one, if you're a new brand, you're not going to be able to sell something to somebody easily right off the bat, right?
Correct.
Because there's no trust there. They don't know who you are, those kind of things. So
There's
there
no
has
brand
to be
equity.
that. There has to be that.
and
at
you
some
got to
point.
sell. Sometimes you got to, sometimes a lot of ads don't have a call to action on them. A lot of our clients, it's just the makeup of our clients, though, unfortunately don't have the budgets to do both.
Right.
They have to actually show return on investment fairly quickly on their spend.
And that right there, that kind of
Yes.
point you're talking about, that's the value that agencies should be bringing.
Yeah.
I.e., depending on what your budget is, what is the correct strategy
Yeah.
to help you be successful? And I think that's where we need to be honing in on as agencies.
Right.
No,
I totally agree with that because some people go in thinking that they're just gonna. I would say this is not a knock, but a lot of times an early stage client will come in with the naive understanding it's because we see all those Facebook ads where you make $1 billion a month, for doing nothing. We all see those kind of things. I don't think there's a silver bullet for any of those things, but I think it teaches people incorrectly that, hey, the internet's like this magic slot machine where it's like I put $1 in, I get $2 back from day one. And I just think business isn't like that, right? And so it's important to educate around, okay, what are you trying to do? What stage are you at, and what are some of the things around your business? And then, okay, what budget do you have, and what are your expectations? Because once you kind of like look at those three areas, and you have to, I really believe, and this is primarily why we get hired, but like you have to be able to have the experience and the knowledge on the business side and the marketing side, and all that kind of goes along with it to create a strategy and assess those things and really coach somebody to say, okay, well, if you're only going to spend X, you may be disappointed because you're not going to probably be able to do direct response, immediate sales on that and get enough to make it to your next month. So it's just the reality of business. Now, that may not always be the case, but a lot of times that may be. So it might be better that you say, hey, look, go get more resources to do this the right way, or maybe do it this way, invest that money in this place over here. And then when you're ready, go over to this kind of thing.
what does an agency do that don't develop killer websites and landing pages, but do a lot of media buy? Like for us, it's very difficult for us to run digital campaigns without actually having control of where these leads are going. Like we don't have control of the website. We don't have control of the landing pages. Some other vendor does that, and they're not really in tune to our strategy, and maybe to the point where it's hard to get them to even update things on the site that are stopping customers from moving down the funnel. Like I can't imagine running ads without having a lot of that control to be able to understand where folks are getting stuck in the journey. But what if you're not an agency that has that? You don't have a dev team, you don't have developed programmers, you're just more content and Facebook ads and things, and you don't have control of that. You don't have control of building e-com sites and the whole funnel.
I mean, I think it's harder, but I think it's something. I think it's an education point, right? I don't think there's right or wrong personally. Like if you're just really good at that and you don't touch anything else, I think just educating around that and the limits of that is important.
I agree.
Because there are limits around that, and it's not a bad thing necessarily. And then where you're able to, if you can be more holistic, I also think there's a benefit there as well.
I think that's a great ending point, guys. I think we can pick up this on the next episode, and we'll be talking about pricing.
Yeah.
Let's
and
dig into
digging into
the model.
that.
Let's try and at least I'd like to talk about how we're trying to adjust the model, at least inside of our own
Great.
companies.
Yeah, let's do it next
All right,
time.
guys. See you next time.
Okay.
Bye.